Hello, I'm Nima Rajan. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau announced today that the federal government will provide loans and financing to the country's largest employers to help them weather the COVID-19 economic crisis. The Liberals are promising bridge financing to companies whose financial needs aren't being met by conventional credit, so that they can stay open and keep employees on their payrolls. The government says that another goal of the financing program, aimed at companies with $300 million or more in revenues, is to avoid bankruptcies of otherwise viable firms wherever possible. Rules on access to the money will place limits on dividends, share buybacks, and executive pay. Meanwhile, the provinces that are hardest hit by COVID-19 have ramped up testing capacity as they reopen their economies. But infectious disease experts say there will be recurring outbreaks without more robust testing, contact tracing, and quarantine services. The Canadian Press analysis of provincial data over a 6-week period shows that the provinces with the highest number of infections, which are British Columbia, Alberta, Ontario, Quebec, and Nova Scotia, each face their own unique versions of the COVID-19 pandemic. Canada's Chief Public Health Officer, Dr. Theresa Tam, says reopening schools and businesses relies on testing and the ability of public health departments to trace the contacts of positive cases. Well, some parts of the country are slowly starting to open up today. In Quebec, most retail stores outside Montreal can open today. Elementary students who live outside the Greater Montreal area are going back to school this morning, but will spend most of their time at their disinfected desks, learning from teachers wearing goggles, masks, and gloves. In Ontario, non-essential retail stores can open starting today for curbside pickup. Alberta is planning to let some retail stores open this week, while BC is phasing in the reopening of its economy starting soon. Some medical procedures are resuming today in Newfoundland and Labrador, and garden centers as well as professional services can also be reopened. A top infectious disease specialist at the University of British Columbia says physical distancing has postponed the spread of COVID-19. But Dr. Peter Phillips says it's not enough to fend off a second wave of infections as provinces look to loosen restrictions and reopen their economies. Dr. Phillips says he is concerned that despite their importance in keeping a second wave of the pandemic at bay, public health departments still aren't getting enough government funding. Alcohol sales are being stopped in the northern Saskatchewan community of Loche as part of efforts to control the spread of COVID-19. Effective Saturday, the province's Liquor and Gaming Authority retail store and a private off-sale location closed for 2 weeks. Mayor Robert St. Pierre said last week that councillors had requested the move to prevent people from leaving their homes and gathering. The Ontario division of the Canadian Mental Health Association says the findings of its latest survey point to a looming surge in demand for mental health supports that existing systems simply aren't equipped to handle. The poll finds most people are afraid of the effects that COVID-19 will have on the national economy, their personal finances, and the well-being of their friends and family. 53% of respondents admit that they are worried about their own mental health. Calgary-based WestJet says it's canceling most of its domestic flights through to July 4th due to an extreme drop in passenger bookings. It also says it's extending its temporary transborder and international route suspensions through to June 25th. Company officials say despite the extended cancellations, the air carrier will continue to operate for essential travel and cargo. In the U.S., New York Governor Andrew Cuomo says 2 young children and a teenager in the state have now died from a possible complication from COVID-19 involving swollen blood vessels and heart problems. At least 73 children in New York have been diagnosed with symptoms similar to Kawasaki disease, a rare inflammatory condition, and toxic shock syndrome. Cases have also been reported in Canada and Europe. However, there is no proof yet that the mysterious syndrome is caused by COVID-19. A case about the appropriate separation between church and state is taking center stage at the Supreme Court. The High Court is hearing arguments by telephone for a second week because of the coronavirus pandemic. The case involving 2 ex-Catholic school teachers and their former employers is one of 2 that the court is tackling on Monday. Other cases this week include high-profile fights over President Donald Trump's financial records and whether presidential electors have to cast their electoral college ballots for the candidate who wins the popular vote in their state. The spokesman for China's National Health Commission says a rise in newly confirmed cases is a growing concern. At a briefing on Monday, Mai Feng told reporters that in the past 14 days, there were 7 provinces reporting new confirmed local cases. The number of cases from local mass infections continues to grow, and that China must find out the origins of the infections and the routes of transmission. China on Monday announced 17 new cases, which is the second consecutive day of double-digit increases after more than a week when daily new cases were in the single digits. Meanwhile, Hong Kong police says more than 200 people were arrested during anti-government protests on Sunday night. Police said protesters chanted slogans and built barriers to block roads in the city's Mong Kok district. The nighttime street action followed multiple protests at shopping malls earlier in the day. Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement has shown signs of reviving in recent weeks as the coronavirus threat eases. The semi-autonomous Chinese city was paralyzed by months of protests last year. A group of 16 unaccompanied asylum-seeking children and 34 adults has left Greece on a flight to the United Kingdom, where they will be reunited with family members who are already there. The move comes as part of a program to relocate about 1,600 unaccompanied refugee children to European countries. The flight heading to the UK will return to Greece with 130 Greeks who had been stranded in Britain due to travel restrictions imposed by the coronavirus pandemic. The Iranian army says a missile strike on a naval vessel taking part in an exercise in the Gulf of Oman has killed 19 sailors and wounded 15. The statement on Monday significantly raised the death toll in the incident Sunday. Earlier, Iranian state media reports said that the ship was too close to a target during an exercise on Sunday. The vessel had been putting targets out for other ships to target. It said the missile struck the vessel accidentally. A 101-year-old Second World War veteran has raised more than $115,000 for a children's charity by walking laps in the courtyard of his Oak Bay retirement home. John Hillman completed 101 laps at his retirement home, and the money he raised will be going to Save the Children Canada's emergency fund. Hillman's daughter, Lynn, says her father was inspired by the efforts of Captain Tom Moore, a 100-year-old veteran who raised $55 million for Great Britain's National Health Service by walking 100 laps in his garden. Well, that'll do it for today's news update. I'm Nima Rajan. Thank you for joining us today, and I'll see you next time.